anytime you're ready.
Okay, I'm going to call to order the Monday, August 9th, 2021 Board of Trustees meeting, with the first order of business being public participation. First, can everyone hear me? Okay, I'm going to speak louder today, hopefully. Any public participation? Hey, person sign. None?
None.
None? Anything on electronic means or chats or anything?
No.
Okay. Okay, then we're going to review previous meeting minutes. It's going to take a couple of seconds to look at the previous meeting minutes. Thank Michelle for stepping in for me too while I was vacationing.
So glad that you're back.
Okay, I'll take a motion on the meeting minutes.
I'll make a motion to accept the previous minutes.
I just make a comment, just trying to scroll down.
Sure, we can take some time.
I think at the very end, and I sent an inquiry in, I think at the very end, right before the board, I can't do a page number on it, but I'm recorded saying, she said there would be all kinds of full board part of discussion, something about here, so I'm trying to, there was some place where I talked about, I said something about transparency, and it seemed a little vague to me, but I think I was saying that if there was any kind of personnel issues, perhaps that had to be related to the long-range plan, some of that may have to be in an executive session, I think is what I meant, but that's the only thing I noticed on that. Can't find it right now.
Okay, do you want me to clarify that?
No, I think we emailed back and forth, and just the way it came out of him.
Okay, I have a motion, do I have a second? All those in, any discussion further? Okay, all those in favor, please raise your hand. Opposed? I'm going to abstain. So we're going to, okay, that motion carries. Okay, moving into the next order of business is the finance report, pages 10, 16.
Okay, you turn your attention to the one-page handout because that's the corrected revenue and expense report. Sorry about the couple of errors in the one that was posted, but between vacations, we had a little trouble getting everything coordinated. So we're, 1 month into the fiscal year, there's obviously not a huge amount of activity, but things look pretty normal. I do want to mention that salaries are a little bit under budget, and I think it's a combination of some open positions and the new rate not taking effect until partway towards the end of the second pay in the month of July. The new rates will be fully in effect beginning in August, and we'll start to see that as we move forward. We do have some more expenses in July than we did last year for probably somewhat obvious reasons because of COVID. We are buying some library materials, which we did in July, and we also had some expenses related to the accounting, the fee for our accounting service, and we paid a portion of the UHLAN fees, which last year didn't take place until later in the year. That looks a little different when you compare, July of this year to July of last year. But other than that, everything's pretty standard, pretty straightforward. I don't know if anybody has any questions on the report or anything else that they'd like to go over.
On the fines, is something expected or?
Yeah, the only revenue that we've seen, obviously, in July are fines and fees, and some of that is from the prior year that was held over and not deposited until July.
but I would say for the month, it seemed a little bit less than normal. Is that kind of what you're asking?
Hey, how's the startup going on this line, actually? You know, how's that going? Okay?
It's all right, probably related to the actual amount of physical circulation,
Yeah.
which is down, so you'd expect fines to be down?
Right.
Probably not.
Okay.
The other thing I want to mention is the auditors will begin the preliminary field work on August 26th.
We'll make a motion.
Okay, thanks, Mary.
Actually, I just have one question. I'm sorry, I'm having a little bit of a hard time hearing. I'm a little hard of hearing anyway, but, so I'm gonna.
Let's get a second on the motion, then we'll go to discussion, okay? Let's get a second on the motion, and then we'll go to discussion.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Okay, any second on Mary's motion? Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought you said you accepted, I couldn't quite hear you. So could you just, just tell us about the Upper Hudson Library System, the $20,000? Is that a routine cost? I think it's on page 16, maybe, of the warrant?
There's a couple of invoices in that. This is Tanya, by the way. There are a couple of invoices in that $20,000 fee. Roughly 18,000 of it is for Upper Hudson fees. We pay those, I think, 4 times a year, Jeff? About.
Yeah.
And then they provide other things for us, like the Read It Forward books and the forms, some of the forms that we use, we order through Upper Hudson. So that $20,000 is actually a combination of that $18,000 and little dribs and drabs of other subscriptions. Actually, I believe one of them is the group membership to NYLA that Upper Hudson provides for us. It's an annual, that part of it is an annual fee. I think that's around $1,500 or so.
And Tanya, is Hoopla, is our subscription to Hoopla also included? Does that get payable to Upper Hudson, or is that payable directly to Hoopla?
That gets payable to Upper Hudson as well. But I can't remember if they bill us all at once or if it's a couple months. They kind of look at the usage and then it's a couple months. We have so many of those, I'm just like, ah!
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so we pay Upper Hudson on the order, don't quote me on this, but it's on the order of about $50,000 a year to have membership in the system, and they bill us quarterly. And then will be the bulk of that. And then the NYLA group purchase, which Upper Hudson does on our, and as Tanya said, and then.
Any other questions on the financials? Okay, all those in favor, please signify by raising their hand. Any opposed, abstentions? Okay, that motion carries as well. Thank you. We'll go to the personnel report, page 17.
All righty, so I'm going to try to speak up. I know it's hard for everybody to hear me. I'll do my best. So, unlike last month where we had no actions requested, we have several actions that we're requesting to fill this month. Among them, we have a librarian 2. So one of our supervising librarians is resigning and requesting to fill that position. That would be the biggest position. The other 3 are part-time. There's a page position, a library clerk position, and a librarian position. So, and the librarian position is part-time, is open because the incumbent was promoted to a full-time opening here. So now that leaves the part-time position that she vacated open, and I'm requesting to fill that as well.
Any questions on those action requested?
Librarian who's leaving?
Yep.
Is there a good reason why?
Yes, a very good opportunity at the Saratoga Springs Public Library for promotion.
She'll be missed.
Yeah, she will absolutely be there. So, but were I counseling her as a mentor rather than as, I'm sorry for the library, but.
But good for her.
It's a very good one. There's not a lot of positions like that.
Is it a three? I mean, is it?
It's a three, so when we talk civil service, the librarians, so your regular line librarians, it's a librarian 1.
Right.
And a librarian 2 is a supervising librarian, then this position that is a librarian 3, and then assistant director. That's what you'd call the librarian
So there's a three.
That's a 3. Yeah, we don't currently have any 3s. We have that position. That position exists in our library. We just don't have any filled right now.
Okay.
But that's that sort of swing between middle management and department head, upper management.
Okay, take a motion on the personnel report.
Before we take a motion, can I just ask, are we,
Of course.
voting on, filling these positions, or do you already have someone in mind to fill the position?
I do not have anybody.
So it's just-
Well, I want to make sure I'm giving you a real answer. You're voting on filling these pending civil service process.
Gotcha. Thank you.
So authorizing you to
Seek to fill.
go forward.
Yeah.
Now that I look at it, I have another question, sorry. You have on the status of the previously approved bill, a bunch of, is there just held open, or you're in the improvement process of those? Like the code?
Not actively. We're looking for more pages right now. Circulation is increasing a little bit, so we need some more page positions. But a lot of the clerical positions and the page positions are directly related to how many books go out of the building and come back into the building, right? So if our circulation is lower and we have the desk covered, which is important, which we do because we're open all of our regular hours now we're just sort of tailoring those. Those have been authorized to fill, but I'm not necessarily seeking to fill them until we need them.
Okay.
So, yeah.
If there aren't any other questions.
Great, thanks, we got a motion and a second. Tremaine, any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor, please signify by raising their hand. Any opposed or abstentions? Hearing none, that motion is carried as well. So we'll move into the director's report. Jeff?
Okay, so, buildings and grounds, the big news, unfortunately, is that we have a leaking condenser coil, as I said in my report, on one of our rooftop units. Now, each one of them has 4 coils and condensers they're pairs, right? So there's 3 redundant backups for this particular compressor. Unless we got a really hot heat wave, it should be able to keep up and continue cooling the space appropriately, but it's going to need replacement. So as the price that was quoted to us was significant, $12,000 and change, we're seeking some other prices from some other vendors so that we can make sure that we're in a reasonable price for this particular work. So there's no doubt that the coil needs to be replaced, but we'll try to make sure we're not paying more than we should to have that work.
What was the third thing did last one? Was it $5,000 repair?
Yes, that was a condensing fan unit. The fan, that was about the fans on these condenser coils. So you have a condenser coil and the fans blow air over those.
I think your heat wave's coming. I hear it's gonna be like,
I know.
this week is the hot week.
Yeah, so even, the good thing about this particular one is it's not pinned on a certain part of the building. It actually, the air interacts with some other parts of the building. So 3 of 4 of them are working. We have never actually clicked into having 4 all on at the same time, except for under a test situation. So even when it gets very hot as it's been this summer at certain times, you only get 2 or 3 of those compressors running at any time. And you wouldn't be without air conditioning. You would just, maybe it would get a little bit overwhelmed and not be able to keep the cooling up to where it needs to be. So it's almost the end of August. So, but, I'd like to get the work done this fall. That would be good, but I'm hoping we can make it through without doing this as an emergency repair, because we've got one other quote. I'm seeking one other quote, so we have 3, so we make sure that we're comparing apples to apples.
So you're cautiously optimistic that you will be able to get, at times we've said there weren't enough players in the game to
get quotes on things?
Yeah, this is a big enough deal, I think, yes, I think, I'm cautious, but we have, like I said, we have two in hand, so that leads me to believe that I can find a third person who can do this work and get them to do that. So, on the same vein, and now we're gonna think about, so we'll leave this one alone for a minute, because I don't have any action for you yet, because I don't have enough quotes for you. On the same vein, we haven't been investigating the boiler and what would happen if the boiler failed, which I know was a question that everybody had because the boiler is older. And basically, our folks from Train said this is not catastrophic for us, even if the boiler were to be down for some sort of middle significant amount of time, because the boiler provides the fine control of the air temperatures that are provided by the air handlers on the roof. So the air handlers on the roof would continue to put heat into the room, so you don't have to be worried that the library is going to freeze. It just might not be as controlled as normal, maybe a little bit warm or a little bit cool, depending on the space, because it's just going to deliver one temperature air to all rooms. Does that make sense? So, certain rooms, they have these little boxes that adjust the heat in specific rooms. It wouldn't be doing that. It would just say, everybody's going to get 72-degree air. So maybe this office is a little bit warmer, that office is a little bit cool. The only spaces in the library that are not heated by the air handlers on the roof and are primarily heated by the boiler are the boiler room itself and the maintenance area. And our techs from Train said they have portable heaters that they have in their shop. They would simply bring them over to here, install them, and we would run those for a while until we got the boiler repaired, and then we'd be back up and running. So, not a pipe freezing crisis. Yeah.
Thank you very much for that answer.
You're welcome.
But I do want to circle back around and make sure I understand. The other part of that question is, if we were to have a failure of some or all of the boiler,
Yes.
the current thinking still is parts are available in
Yes.
the U.S.
Correct.
Okay.
Parts are available, and I don't have a good answer for you about, they didn't really want to answer the question about should we just buy an end unit, a left end unit, and a right end unit, and a couple middles, and just stack them up and leave them in the boiler room. Our mechanic was a little bit like, why would you do that? Because they're available.
Hearing the explanation of the interaction between the boiler and the roof unit, it would seem to me that I would agree with his logic as to why would you do that if the parts are available. So I just don't want to be here the day that any of our clubs or anybody are in here and it's 60 degrees, but I'm not going to worry about that.
Right, so effectively, now, it's a little swampy in here tonight, right? The kind of heating that we get on this side of the building, the two rooms and in this community room in the hallway, these are not adjusted by the boiler at all. That all takes place on the other side of the building. So the kind of heating and cooling you'd have is exactly the kind of heating and cooling we already have in this part of the building. So this sort of, it's a little bit simple, it's not nuanced, and it doesn't really have any control, and that's why this side of the building tends to have a little less control, a little bit more airflow, that sort of thing, because the boiler doesn't reach over to this part of the building to adjust the heat. So it's not that we don't have any experience with that sort of heating and cooling situation. Cooling, it doesn't matter, but heating it matters.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, sorry about that. I know everybody hates HVAC, so me too. The new book drop is on the way, and I did order 2 extra carts, so we would have 2 carts live in it all the time. I ordered 2 extra carts so we could swap them out and always have a couple extras. So that's on the way. It should be here. As soon as it gets here, we'll install it.
Does the shed, are they rentals or to be buy?
The shed, the plastic sheds, we bought.
Okay, good.
So we're using 3 of them around the property for different stuff.
Yeah, good.
So when that one comes, we'll install that, and the final shed will come out of the parking lot. We can have those spots back, and people can go back to returning things in the traditional spot. So we're excited about that. It's good. I was worried that area was going to be a little bit busy with pickup, curbside pickup, and drop off, but there's still enough room if there's a person dropping off books at the book drop and people picking up. There's still plenty of room to get down the middle and exit the door. All right, so public services, the Upper Hudson's launched its new app. We're going to be advertising that, and there was some talk that there's a function in here for self-checkout, so people can check out the books through the app themselves without coming to the circulation desk. There was some talk that functionality was going to be pulled back or tested a little bit more before it was launched, and that's not the case. So it's live and available for our patrons. We're going to be putting it out to our public a bunch this week and telling everybody that it's there. So absent that checkout function, which is awful nice, the rest of the app appears to work pretty well as well. So it's expensive, but we don't have to pay for it. So yay, state money. Let me see. Lots of interesting programs. You have the pictures in there. I don't mean to gloss over that, but we're going to. Outreach continues. Farmers market still continues to be, they still run into people each time who say, oh, you're open again? So good outreach, you know, they can find out that the library's back, and that's good news. And then fines have gone along so far this month, and it's not going to exactly match the financial report, but we collected about $967. So you think, Mark, we have budgeted in the past between $30,000 and $36,000 a year in fines. $900, it would be under that number, but that just gives you a sort of a guesstimate about, you know, fines are coming in. And the new register, this Clover register, allows us to accept credit cards in a very easy way, much less clunky. It's not done through a browser on a computer. It's just done through the hardware. And that Sherry worked that out with the bank, and Catherine worked on getting it implemented, and all the staff are trained up on it. So we're really happy with that cash register. Seems to be working really well. Yes.
After the fines of $967, you say replacement costs were $908. What is replacement for, lost books?
Lost, damaged.
So after the pandemic, is it related to that people lost
We did,
their books,
well,
or is that a normal monthly
it's
cost?
a little bit higher, because, you know, when fines weren't, so people's account can get held up for fines, but they can also get held up for lost and damaged books, right? So when fines weren't instituted, people were allowed to check things out. At the same time, people can pay for lost books through Upper Hudson's catalog, the Encore catalog. So some people are paying for that, but it's a little bit higher than normal, but not.
But is that a monthly cost?
That's amount.
No,
I would say that's higher than average, but it's still go ahead, Tanya.
there was a check, because some people can pay online. Upper Hudson sends us money quarterly. So that's part of the quarter, March, April, May, June. So part of that money is from what people have paid over the course of those 3 months. It just didn't get deposited until July because it ended June 30th.
Got it, and the check came from Upper Hudson. Okay.
Yes.
So
it doesn't sound like it was 1 month, it sounds like it was month.
3 months plus anything we collected inside. So that seems even more reasonable.
Yeah, because I thought that seemed very high.
So,
$1,000 a month in lost items? Yeah.
books are
Okay.
25 bucks a book, and then it's.
And people, if they can't find something right away, they'll pay it. And then when they find it, they bring it back and we give them their money back. Like if they have something that's lost on their account, they can't take anything out. So they'll pay it. And then, you know, a month later, oh, I found this book. And then they bring it back to us and we end up giving them their money back.
All right. Thanks, Tanya. And then, so I don't know if you've been inside the library yet, but we reorganized the public computers. There's little tables in between the other tables, so it just gives, like this, it's a little bit of elbow room for everybody, so they're not quite crammed in as much as they were previously. And then a bunch of continuing education continues on apace. The circulation trends look really good because, of course, last year at this time we were just getting going as far as openings are concerned, so big increases in all of our circulation statistics. But, you know, 51,000 for this month is a little bit low for July, but it is getting back more towards a regular circulation number, certainly higher than last year, but again, that's not a fair comparison. But just overall, those circulation numbers are starting to feel a little bit more like what we would expect. Now, that's a little bit of a higher percentage of electronic circulation than in past years, because some people haven't come back. You know, they went to electronic circulation, found out they liked it, and they continue to circulate that way. So physical circulation is, but the numbers are coming up, so that's good. That makes me happy to see. You'll see on my statistical report, we're talking on page 22, the interlibrary loan numbers are down significantly for the number of items we borrowed in, because that was last year. You think back to July, all of the circulations would have been books that were on hold and then delivered outside via curbside pickup. So everything came in via the hold system. So we had a big percentage of items were coming in from outside, so that number is much lower this month by about 20%, but still a very active interlibrary loan going on in between the libraries. Door count obviously is up over a door count of 0 last year, so that's good. 12,000, again, a little bit low for a July, but looking pretty good. And then continued nice increases in e-audiobook, which I've been harping on for months, and then some slight drops in e-book use, particularly the e-book, electronic book use itself is down significantly compared to where we were last July, where so many people were using that as their primary circulation. So those are some interesting numbers, and then you know, you can look at the rest of the statistics, but I think again, you know, electronic numbers continue to go up even post-pandemic. Down compared to the very high spike, but the overall trend just continues to be higher and higher for electronic materials. So. Any questions?
Can I just add, Jeff, that I know that the kind of diversity committee was mentioned
Yes.
in writing. Just so the board knows, because of my background, I was invited. We had a meeting. I guess it was the committee just starting off, so I just kind of came to an open discussion. We talked, they have some great ideas of things that they might be doing. I think the feedback I gave was mostly around language and how people talk about things, the language that they use in their work. I think we had an interesting discussion about doing sort of diversity-related work or mindful work in a position when the library is seen as neutral. We had an interesting discussion about the idea of neutrality, but it was, I think, for me, very well worth the time, very exciting. The fine policy did come up, and so at some point, I don't know where on the agenda we can talk about that, but in terms of in their pursuit of equity in the library, and they're talking about training and looking at the catalog, that did come up. But I appreciated the invitation, and I thought it was a thoughtful discussion.
Thank you, Charmaine. And we are going to, you know, our first step is we're going to focus on training. I had really felt that we were going to be able to have a staff development day this December, and I had counted on having sort of, you know, in the morning we do some pretty weighty work in the morning, and then we do some lighter team building activities and other lighter, shorter training in the afternoon on staff development day. And I can just feel an in-person staff development day slipping out of my hands. So we're going to work forward and do the best training that we can do. Probably will continue to rely heavily on electronic training. So there we are. Thank you. I appreciate you coming in. It was good to have you there, Sherman. Thank you.
Any other questions for Jeff on the director's report? Okay, thank you. UHLS report?
No meeting in August, so nothing to report this month.
Okay, let's go to new business and phase reopening plan, Matt.
Okay. You will see on page 25 of your packet, you'll see the phased reopening plan. Some, basically, it's not that Jeff has decided, but we're back at phase 5. So we had moved forward. We were on phase 6, flirting with 7, and now we're headed in the other direction. I have some proposed changes in there, which I would seek your approval on. And then the one in red, I have a highlighted in red which is the recommendation that, right now, the guidance we put in there is according with the guidance from New York State. Masks are encouraged indoors for all patrons. Masks are required for unvaccinated patrons. That's what this would say right now, and the question is, given the current state of COVID in Albany County and where we are, is it time for us to reimpose mandatory masks for all visitors to the library? And my recommendation is, especially considering that we just clicked over to a high level of community transmission, it feels like we're there, but this is an important discussion for the board to have as well.
So I would ask, what percentage of people come in without a mask right now? I mean, roughly.
It was a lot higher before and a lot lower now. So,
would you say a third, an eighth, or, I'm trying to figure out. Third, yeah.
I think a third is fair. We were clicking around about 40% masked, and then higher than that today.
Are you saying since you put the sign up?
I don't think it has anything to do with our signs. I think it has to do with people's awareness of the situation, and...
I honestly think people look for signs.
Okay. Well, I think we did put the signs back up, and
I think a lot of people would wear a mask if you had a sign up.
That's
If
it.
you don't have a sign up and they're not paying attention, and you say something to them,
I mean, so we have a sign up right now that says masks are recommended indoors. I mean, that's what our CDC guidance is. I'm not expecting there to be any guidance from the state on this anytime soon.
I mean, the county went all county offices, all masked, no matter vaccinated staff, so.
So the county went for employees.
The way I read it was all people entering a building, a county building, have to be masked.
I will just add to Lisa's comment. My observation, walking around in the community, being out in Walmart and Price Chopper in the community, mask wearing has ratcheted up drastically in the last couple of weeks. And that is not because of science. That is because of the news, okay? So I would say, I don't know, when I go into those places, I don't know, during the week, I think it's probably closer to half the patrons in those stores are masking up. But I don't think that really absolves us from taking a hard look at this right now, so. Yeah, can I ask a question? I just want to check. Were you asking, and maybe, I don't know, I'm just obviously having, maybe it's allergies, trouble keeping up with it today. Were you asking for direction on the board or whether or not you should go to mandatory mask for patrons?
That's the question,
That's
right?
what I thought you were asking.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and we were, when I put this out, we were at this sort of elevated risk in Albany County. Just since when we put the packet out to now, Albany County has clicked over into high level of community transmission. Again, there are no mandates from either the federal government or the state. They're leaving that to local officials. That's us. And
So you were fielding kind of some discussion about what are people seeing, but circling back to what you asked is, do you want direction from the board whether or not you should go on?
right. I mean, and the reason I ask is that there are undoubtedly going to be some people who are angry about that. And when we have a rule, like when the library puts, when we put a mask mandate on, I put someone at the door, and everybody that comes in is wearing a mask, and that's enforced. A rule that you don't enforce is stupid. Like, why would you have that? It's dumb. So if you're going to have a rule, you got to enforce your rule, and if we have the rule, we will be enforcing it. So it's not my intention at this point to close down the Delaware Avenue entrance. I'd imagine that if we put the mask mandate back on, or the mask policy for the library, we'll position someone near the doorway to the central doorway from the hallway into the library. We'll be reminding people of all the sorts of masks that aren't acceptable and that they have to have a mask on to come into the library.
And do you provide like a little set of the blue ones in case people don't have one?
I have thousands of them.
Okay.
Yep.
So if someone comes in and doesn't have one, they could, okay.
Oh, yeah, happy to offer.
I think we're all on the same page with what I'm going to say, but I want to put it out there for public information. I believe the board is beyond saying we think it should be show your ID and if you're vaccinated or not vaccinated. We're not going there. We're not having that discussion. We don't see that as a viable path for the board to take. I think we're in agreement on that. Okay, so what's open to us, what we're considering, is the mask policy.
Yeah.
Okay, I want people to know that the board has, at some level, considered that and said, no, we're not going there. Okay.
I mean, my thoughts are, as long as you're at a high incidence, or you know, as long as it's not a negative to have an all mask mandate for patrons and for, you know, people are kind of used to it. I think, you know, you'll get some grumbling, whatever, but people, it's why not protect everyone if you can? That's where my thoughts are at this point. I don't think it's as big a deal as some people think it is, frankly. But.
And people who don't want to wear one can use curbside.
Absolutely.
Or electronic. Yeah.
I would support you as the director making this decision. I mean, I feel like you are on the ground, you know what, so I have a personal opinion, but I think I support you.
Do you know what the school is doing in the fall, by any chance?
I do not know. I heard what Albany schools are doing, but I haven't heard of Bethlehem schools yet.
They have a board meeting on Wednesday.
Well, just to confirm what Mark said earlier, it is employees and visitors that Albany County is requiring for now.
Okay.
So we have that precedent already. The only other thing I think would help bolster the position of mandating masks is if the school was doing it also, because we are part of them, so to speak.
I can't imagine. I would be stunned if they were not. But I don't want to say I know because I don't know.
So when we say everybody coming into the building, does that include children?
Everybody, sorry, that I wasn't clear about that earlier. Everybody over the age, 2 and over.
Okay, so, person walks in with a 6-year-old child that does not have a mask with them. Do we have masks to help them? What is our, we have
The same wet mask that you've got there, the little blue mask, we've got a lot of them. I will confess that I don't at this time have little teeny tiny masks, but maybe that's a good idea. You know, but that's, yeah, we absolutely are very free and open. Our pandemic response plan requires that we have a case, about 2,000 masks, forever, in perpetuity, and we were right at 2,000, and I just had them reordered. I got another crate. So we're ready. We have enough right now, and we'll get another crate in. It'll be here in a couple days, and we have plenty of masks for people.
Well, I think, I don't even think it warrants discussion.
I do have another question, though. What would be the trigger for removing the mask mandate?
I think we would look to the same CDC guidelines where this community spread number that they're using, this high, low, medium. When we moved out of having the mask in the first place for the public, and then we moved on the staff after that, I was using a combination of that number and then watching the community risk on the New York Times website. So when those move out of substantial into moderate risk, that's when we take it back off. And again, I would when that happens, and I'm confident it's going to, hopefully not too long, we remove that. I'll leave it in place for the staff again, just for a little bit. I think that helps when the staff have to wear masks. I think that makes people feel a little bit more comfortable, and it kind of eases that transition. And then we would move to either dropping that completely or doing some combination of verification for the staff. But those CDC numbers, you can see, you just track it right along. So.
I think that is definitely a question we're going to get. So I'm in favor of making masks mandatory for everybody, patrons and employees. I think we are going to get the question of how long is this for and when is it going to go back down. And I think pointing at the CDC definitions is fairly clear cut. We're at moderate when the CDC rules say we get back to low, which is 10 cases per 100,000 or less than 5% positivity rate. That's well defined. That's the metric. Right? Simple.
Yeah, Albany, just for clarification, Albany County never got to low, we never got to the blue, we never got to low, we got to yellow, whatever that moderate risk, that's where we've been living for most of the summer, so. But I think that's a good.
I think using every communication vehicle at your disposal to get that change out would be important. And also maybe, I don't know how well versed the staff is, but from Harvey's point, maybe having a little cheat sheet or something so they can refer to, so when staff are asked, whoever the staff member can quickly refer to, or however you get information out to them, you know, so they can have the quick bullet points, which might be helpful.
First of all, when we say regular hours, I assume that we are presuming come September, we're going to be open on Sundays.
Correct.
Okay,
Yep.
so we are still heading in
We're
that
staffed for it, we're ready to go.
Okay. The second question I have is, if we were to, as a board, decide to move forward with the mask mandate, would we say effective immediately? Would we maybe consider a soft 1 or 2 days where we say, you know, we're all heading there, you really should be having masks on. We're being a little lenient today and tomorrow, but I don't know if there's a value to that, you know, not hitting everybody over the head out of the blue. I open that question.
I don't think it's out of the blue, though. I mean, if you scroll through any social media feed, it's all announcements of who's going mandatory, and the big announcement today was, any leaders of the category. They can still have performances, they're going mandatory.
It doesn't matter because we're going to give them masks. So it's not like they came to the library and they can't get in. So it's not going to impact.
I can't entirely hear what both of you are saying, but I think I'm getting the gist of it. And I would say the only place, and again, I'm for the mask mandate, but the only place I'm wearing a mask is in the library. I don't wear a mask in the grocery store. I don't wear it at my gym. There's just nowhere else that I go that's actually requiring a mask. Is that what you guys were discussing?
No, I was kind of asking, I was saying, if we decide to go forward with the mask mandate, typically that would mean effective immediately. And I was asking the board as a group, did we think we ought to give like a 1 or 2 day grace so it wasn't like we were dropping a bombshell?
Right, because people might not be expecting to have to wear a mask because they don't in other places.
But then
Yeah.
Bill's point, I think, goes back to, but we're ready to hand them out masks anyway. This is not out of the blue. Other places are talking about wearing masks.
Again, I'll go back to the point, I definitely don't think it's out of the blue. We're back to masking for the most part, and a number of community organizations, very sadly, year back.
And I think the status, I think that's a very good point, and so people might be surprised that there may be some pushback there, but I think if the information gets out, plus, we get the Times Union, but any newspaper every day on the front page is the community standing and really in relation to the virus is on the front page of everything, but, no, I think that's a very good point, and some people might push back on that, and just say, that way you can just fall back on the trustee decision.
Play devil's advocate, we have people that come to the library that are not reading the Times Union, and they're not from this county. You need to put the notices out there.
Well, that's, just from so to Mary's point, so thank you for the discussion, I really appreciate it. To Mary's point, it's gonna take us a little bit of time to either dust off the signs that we have or make the new signs that we need, just from a practical standpoint, get the table set up, get ourselves back into that position. It could take us a little bit to do that, but I would say when I have done that, we have the notices up as much as we can out in the public, we put the signs up, it's from that point forward, I would say. So, you know, maybe if someone sneaks in here at 9 a.m. tomorrow morning, that's fine, if that's the way we're going, but as soon as we can get ourselves together, we've got some talking to do about that, then it would be as soon as practically possible.
So then the bullet on here about staff members demonstrating status as fully vaccinated would stay? To remove masks indoors?
Well, it's not gonna stay, yeah, you're right, no, thank you for that, yeah, no.
And I also don't, the highlighted possibly instituted toward the end of phase 5, how do you know when that is?
When we decide it is, right, that's
I mean, that's like crystal ball.
It is, but we know when we kind of get there, that's really. phases don't have clear edges, as we've found. You know, at some point they just become either unnecessary. Luckily, we've been going in one direction. It's been, you know, you get to towards the end of a phase, things become a little bit unnecessary, and we start a service back up, and those kind of become our phase initiators. So, yes, you are correct. I did not take that out. So, that needs to get taken out. So the bullet point under the red bullet point, the staff members demonstrating status is fully vaccinated to HR and administration may remove their mask. We'll take that out, to be instituted at some later date, should that become necessary. So with that point taken out, that whole bullet removed, so thank you for that, Lisa. As far as the red bullet is concerned, we would say in accordance with guidance from New York State, masks are required for indoors for all patrons and staff.
Right. Well, you can't say in accordance from New York, or guidance from New York State.
I would just say masks are required.
Okay.
It's the direction, in accordance with the Board of Trustees discussion
You want to say that,
at
yeah.
next meeting, in consideration of blah, blah, stuff.
One other question on this, not math, but where we are in general and things are heading, what is that doing to programs? We're pulling back on some programs, right?
Right. So,
That kind of happened at the library, more the library staff's judgment
right.
rather than out, and which is fine.
Right.
Okay? So we're not really taking that into consideration, right?
We were ready to, so we're doing outdoor programs right now. It's great, summertime. We were ready to say, because it was so rainy in July, we were like, oh, if it rains, we can pull a program inside, no big deal. That isn't going to happen. Now, if it rains and we can't have the program outside, it gets postponed or canceled. We've got another couple months until this becomes a major issue, and I think I am 0 for a million trying to guess where this thing's going to go. So in October, when we're trying to guess where we're going to be as far as programs are concerned, I would love to be saying that we're here and I can have programs in the community room, but it doesn't look very likely from where I'm sitting right now. So what would then happen is if we can't have a program outside, it's going to have to be virtual. You know, and that's a level of agility as far as planning is concerned that is we've come to expect, but we're not, you know, that's difficult to get everything scheduled.
Are those aspects of library operations at some level addressed in this plan?
Yes.
Okay, all right. So it's not like somebody can say, well, you took the mask away and it didn't say anything about programs and now I don't have the programs. That's not what's happening. They're going to be able to see what's going on. Okay.
I would love to not have to move back to phase 4, because the next thing actually we'll have a brief discussion about, but it's not really in here to vote on. We've opened these rooms back up for public meetings, right? That's great, and people are certainly booking them. In the summertime, there's a lot less booking. So in the whole month of August, there's one group that booked this room and asked for the kitchen, and it's tomorrow. So for the rest of the month of August, no one's requested the kitchen. So that would be an issue. How can you have a kitchen if you're requiring masks for everybody, you know, if they're eating or whatever? So I'm going to remove that as an option for groups that want to book the room for now, but we have a number of groups in September and October that have booked these rooms and expect there to be a kitchen, and it may well be that that's not something that we can offer them. Even if they've already booked it, we'll have to contact that group and say that's something we have to pull back. If the situation continues to get worse, we'll have to cancel the reservations that people have for these rooms altogether. So
That kind of stuff should not be unexpected. When we see the direction things are going in, people have to
I think that's what the work that went into this document is helpful, because you're just backing, you're either going forward or backwards, depending on the phases, depending on the level of.
We tweak it each time because we learn a little bit more in each direction. It's not even perfect as we're going back. There's still some tweaks that need to happen. There's some services that I'm very comfortable doing, like we waited quite a while for notary service to come back, but I think that's actually a service that's not particularly risky, so we can keep that maybe further back in the phases than we had it in the other direction. But
Will you reach out to the people who have made appointments or reservations rather for September and October and let them know this might happen?
yeah, I mean now it's middle of.
As far as the kitchen.
Yeah, in the middle of, we're in the middle of August now. I mean, now we're in the middle of August. I think it's probably extremely reasonable to assume that this situation isn't going to resolve itself to our satisfaction by September. And it's unfortunate because in September, longstanding groups that have used these rooms for a long time are requesting the rooms. So there might be some pushback on that as well. But the situation kind of is what it is. But I think at the same time, what we notice is as we start to pull some services back, a lot of groups just are pulling back their requests for it anyway. I don't think anybody's surprised when we call them and say, no kitchen, you can still have a meeting, but we're not, no tea and coffee and all of that stuff. People don't seem surprised when we have to do that. I'm hoping that continues to be the case. But yes, probably not October yet, but we'll warn the September people that that's a possibility. And we say, we saw you requested the kitchen. Is that a legitimate request? Or is this just something you click every time you have a meeting? And we'll have that conversation.
Yeah, I want to say one more thing on this. I would say it's okay to be a leader on this, too. I know we're always trying to see what people does, but as a public institution, I think we should be a leader on public health a little bit. So I'm okay with leading a little bit, even though we're ahead of some people, just in general. That's my personal feeling. As a public institution, we have that responsibility. So.
Well, I think this board meeting happened to be very conveniently placed for us to have this discussion. Had the situation changed wildly 3 days after the board meeting, I think I would have had to take an action, and then we would have been talking about it sort of ex post facto at the next meeting. So I was pleased to be able to have the discussion.
I make a motion. Is that how we do it? Okay. I'm sorry, I'll second it.
Oh, were you
I
going to
make
say
a
the motion?
motion for the board, for Jeff to reinstitute the mandatory mask policy in the library for both patrons and staff.
And I'll second. Second, and for discussion, all those in favor, raise your hand. Any opposed or abstentions, motion carries.
Well, I'm assuming that was accepting the phased reopening plan.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, yes.
I think everything else in yellow, other than the bullet that we're going to remove completely, thanks, Lisa, is relatively minor. So when we were I'm not going to belabor this, but for instance, when we were in this phase last time, social distancing was required by the CDC, and we don't have any guidance from either the state or the CDC for that right now. So I'm not, even though we're in phase 5, I'm not blowing the staff out of their workspaces again and pulling back all the study rooms. I think if we're here a month from now, or not here a month from now, having a conversation on Zoom about this, and things have gotten substantially worse, then we may have to take that action to reinstitute social distancing among the staff. Because those workroom, some of the staff are in offices, right? So they're inherently social distance, but many of the staff, I know we've taken tours of the cubicles back in the workroom. Social distancing is not possible when all of the staff people are there. It's not possible. So we're using masks. I think they're very effective. If we have to get to social distancing, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. So that's a minor change in phase 5 compared to where we were last time. The study rooms, which is where the staff were, very popular among the public, so they're happy to have them. So I'd like to leave them for them as long as we can, but if we have to change, we will. Thank you. I appreciate it.
The other question I have is, the library has an education resource, so is there vaccine information available for the patrons? Is there testing? I mean, we should have an educational role too. So I don't know if we can either, collate that or collect that or refer people to the right websites or something. So we can still have a role in the vaccine.
Yep. And then. Okay. I got it.
Mark, when you made that suggestion over email,
Yeah.
I really liked it. I mean, a fan in the library kind of, the information, but I don't know where it goes beyond, but even an online program of a health professional debunking some things, or just saying, hi, hey, this is why the vaccine is good, this is what it does, this is what it doesn't do. It doesn't have to have it doesn't have to be phrased as debunking, but just these are the facts. This is what a vaccine does.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, next, Freddie. Board retreat is the next item from the business. Sounds like, I watched the last meeting, and I watched it again this morning. Sounds like there's a desire for a board retreat. And the question would be timing and then mechanics, I guess.
Yep.
What do we mean by retreat? Do we mean like an afternoon that we spend together, or do we mean that we all go into the woods and do trust falls? Like, I mean, it's like a timing question.
I think it's an extended period of time that's outside of the business meeting.
Yeah.
Like here, like it's like, yeah, like here or another place, yeah.
But in my mind, I was thinking like 3 or 4 hours. Like, not, maybe a day, but probably not a full day. That's what I was.
And I wasn't clear even after reading the minutes. I was like, oh yeah, this came up. I wasn't clear why. What are we doing the retreat for? Was it to discuss the long-range plan?
Yeah, my impression was it was discuss like the future, the long-range, the service plan, the long-range plan, and kind of like outside of the bounds of a public meeting a little bit. So so that the board could feel, the members could all feel like they had a contribution, and we could kind of see where people's mind is at and head is at. That's what I got out of the meeting, but I wasn't there, but that's what I got out of the video, actually.
My sense is this, as people have explained to me, board meetings are basically the business meetings of the library in public. And a retreat would be an additional time where we're not making any decisions on anything because you can't, because it's not a business meeting. It's not. But it's to have this larger discussion. Could be, depending on what the agenda is, philosophical. It could always be a check-in about, how the, dynamics, how, what if justice not working for us, could be an item, for example. And then definitely the long-range planning is, how do people, I'm making this up on the fly, how do people see the direction of it? What parts are making sense, what parts do we need to move on, but not making any decisions, but an additional time set aside, not on a Monday night that's going to go into multiple hours beyond the regular time we have set aside, but with an agenda and a facilitator to guide us through a discussion that's going to help us then come back at a business meeting and make public decisions in public. Does that make sense?
I think the 3 agenda items that were kind of keyed up last time were the long-range plan, the long-range service plan, right? Really walk through that with the staff and have a chance to ask all of our questions, and then talk about a fine-free policy, right? Do we want to seriously consider going fine-free, and what would that look like?
And I just want to clarify, when we say talk about the long-range plan, we're talking about the fall Mays report. Right? We're talking about saying, I like this, I don't like that, and really kind of as a complete board, rather than, what the committee has done so far, which is outstanding, getting everybody's input so we can, start to say we're ready to make decisions that we want to bring to another level.
Right, and I think what I heard last time, and in a follow-up conversation with Paul, he's ready to go to issue his report to you. I think he would love to hear some feedback from the trustees, on that report, if there's something that needs to be tweaked or changed, something that's factually incorrect, it's time to get that changed up, and then that report will be issued by his office, to you. So,
Well, I mean, for example, one of the things that he has talked about repeatedly is the idea of a foundation and fundraising. And those are not things currently that we can do. We don't have a foundation, we can't fundraise. So he should not refer to those things in that report, because they don't exist. At a board retreat, we could talk about a foundation. I mean, there are libraries that have them, Albany has one. It's a concept that this community probably would embrace. So I would say that would be something we should talk about. That's very long range.
yeah.
You know, I like that idea a lot. Let's like try to air that idea out. Is this something that we're willing to talk about, and like what would we as a board think? I also was thinking like, what do we think as a board, like, what's the capacity for the public to absorb additional financial exposure on the library? So, do we want to do we want to do a project? If we do, how big a project do we want to do? Kind of in general. I think we have a diversity of opinion on that on the board. I'd like to hear from all the different trustees on that one, actually.
Yeah, I think anything that gets us closer to having a long-range plan that is accepted by the trustees and voted on so that we can put it out to the public,
Yep.
I'm in favor of. So, whatever gets us there is a good thing. You know, we have some questions right now about location. I don't know, is this space the best place for us to do that? Would we like to go off-site? We've looked around the town a little bit. We have a couple, a few options. There's places we might consider. And then how long, right? So is it a weekend day? Is it an evening? How many hours are we talking about? I think those are questions that you have to answer, and then I will make it work for you.
So what in the concept called a straw dog, I'll put out a straw dog, which is 3 hours, one night, facilitated. So you said 3 hours, like an evening, not a weekend, but a weekday evening, 3 or 4 hours, so maybe starting at 4:30 or 5, right? And facilitated or mediated, whatever. And I don't care where, here's fine for me, just to throw something out for consideration.
I don't know that I think we can get through everything in 3 hours.
Okay.
However, I think that 3 hours might be a time limit that, beyond the point where we're saturated, okay? And whether we get through one topic in 3 hours or one and we start the second discussion. But I think, we could parse it out and start with a 1 3 hour one. I think we are committed to doing it with the facilitator, that we think that will help us out with it, so.
In a prior life, I used to fly around the country and do board retreats for a national not-for-profit. I think a good strategy is to have the appropriate number of items on an agenda that's going to help a board be successful. So a lot of it is going to be driven by the length of time. So, for example, if it's a 3-hour retreat, then the facilitator might poll everyone and say, okay, what's on your mind, and then take those and choose which ones are going to, and the time allotted for each of those in order for the board to be successful. So I think what may be helpful is to say, get an opinion on how long do people want to go. And then perhaps at some point, whoever's going to facilitate it, I would recommend polling the board members, say, what are the top 2 items, 3 items, and then that person should take those. But I think, for example, a 3-hour retreat, I would say the maximum, and if you want this to be part of it, the maximum thing, for example, from my experience, would be 2 things. And one would be a quick check-in, how are things going, and then the rest is that. A 4-hour retreat might be nice to start early, do that check-in, have a little meal, a little social time, and then dive into that. But that's just from my experience, but I do have a lot of experience with board retreats. If folks are willing to go longer, like a 6-hour retreat with some breaks and yada, 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 then you might be into the 3 topics. But I think a good point, we want to be successful. And so the number of items and the depth of each item should
be driven by the length of time the board wants to be together, if that makes sense. I don't know if you want.
Right, that's been my experience with board retreats as well. And usually they've been full day. It's definitely a time investment, but it's usually worthwhile, in my experience.
Well, I know that when I first started on the board, there was a consensus that we had committees to keep the board meetings efficient, and so that they could work on the nitty-gritty and then bring the bulk of it back to the board. So it does seem to be an opposing thing, the extra day-long retreat as opposed to a committee structure. That's just making that point, I guess.
That's a good point.
I mean, I don't feel the committee structure addresses these larger issues. They just don't.
You don't think it addresses?
The larger issues, because even if we've been talking about, the long-range plan, not everybody's been on that committee, so you have people that don't feel comfortable with making those decisions.
Right, not everyone's on the finance committee, not everyone's on, that's the problem with the committee structure. Or the I shouldn't say problem, that's a downside. But,
Do you have a sense of how long of a retreat we do?
I have a feeling it's gonna be hard to organize everyone's schedules for a day-long retreat. I'm interested to see how it will work out.
Okay.
Your point has occurred to me, okay, about the committee structure versus the retreat. However, I look at it like, for instance, just looking at the long-range plan, I think that the committee that got us to this point, that was time well spent outside the board structure, and it probably, as much time as was spent on it and all the field trips and everything, it got us to here, and it got us to the point where we're saying, okay, now we've got all this information, it's pulled together in a professional way. Are we ready to just take it and run with it, or what do we want to tweak in it, okay? It's been a while since we talked about fines, and we want to look at it again as a group, okay? But I don't think we want to take time in a board meeting to do that. And maybe we don't want to talk about some of the things in an open board meeting that we would talk about amongst ourselves. So I think for these topics, I think it would be constructive to have me. I have to say, setting aside a day for me would not be the burden. The burden for me would be thinking that I could constructively discuss these three topics in that day. I think the three separate topics, discussing them in any depth, is just too much in one day for me. I'd rather break it into more than one session.
Then we schedule something.
Point, kind of breaking it into more than one session. And trust me, I'm not big on the whole giving up where I have exactly 0 time at the moment. But we're here, and then people sign up for it. It's putting one event on the calendar and saying in 6 months, this is when the second one happens, and then move to an annual kind of thing or an as needed. Because I think the issue is that, and this has certainly been the case since I've been on the board, is that there's been these overwhelming things that have come up and have dominated our board meetings that are not necessarily the day-to-day business of the board. COVID is fortunately now the day-to-day business of the board, but that conversation that might have gone to the long-range planning over the past year is now about, has become this. So I think, and I don't foresee that ending anytime soon. Don't foresee COVID anytime soon, but also just those larger things that come up. Before that, it was, the makerspace, kind of the public view of that. So I don't see any way how it gets addressed without some sort of extra effort.
I think I second Mark's thought on a first proposal, right? For something that we haven't done before, let's just set out 3 or 4 hours, right? Pick an evening and try it. we can get through one agenda item, great. If we can get through two, even better. I think you're right, we're probably not gonna get through more than two, but it's a place to start.
Also, in terms of a long-range plan, it may go in phases, and some of it may be in a retreat, some of it may be in a meeting. For example, the first thing would be, what are the general overall thoughts on it, as opposed to like the nitty-gritty is, you know, and then diving into different sections, like concrete blocks. Maybe part of it's for the business I'm meeting, maybe it's not, I'm not sure. But it's sort of, where are we, you know, what are general thoughts about this, and then maybe some of the fine pieces could be discussed either in like an additional hour tacked onto something or during the business meeting, is a thought.
So, sorry to bring this back to the practical. It sounds to me like we're looking at 3 or 4 hours in an evening at some point. Bringing that in just from a purely practical standpoint, is it that you feel that a retreat would be productive if we're all wearing masks? Like, is that a thing? Right, and so it's important because it's about timing, right? So I feel the pressure, I want to get the long-range plan completed, I know a retreat would be good for moving that forward. You're meeting here right now. Would you feel a meeting that was practically, that looked a little bit like this, would be what you imagine a retreat would be, or is now not the time to be doing that? You know, if you want to have a meal together, that's not going to be part of that. I'm running out of evenings to do an outside anything, which would maybe help that a little bit. So it just, I hate to throw the monkey wrench in there, but that's, you know, I think it's important.
And then how quickly can you get a facilitator, you know, also. So hearing things, but let me, my mind's kind of going back to this. I would suggest potentially a 3-hour program, or possibly a 4th, where we do a focused, you know, kind of meet, get settled, maybe an easier warm-up task, maybe just a check-in. You know, group dynamics says you change a single member of a group, the whole group changes. Maybe a check-in there, and then like a snack break, and maybe that could be outside or just whatever. It doesn't have to be a meal, but some tougher break. And then diving into a longer phase discussion of the long-range plan in the same way, shape, or form that the facilitator then decides. That's what the job is, to figure out how to frame a 2 to 3 hour discussion of, say, within 2 hour discussion of this in a way that's going to be helpful for the board, and then sets the board up for more concrete discussions over the course of the fall. Does that sound too directive, or does it seem like a framework that? So you talk about like 3.5 hours, kind of warm up, a check-in, some open discussion about what's working, what's not, snack, and then diving into this, and it's up to the facilitator we bring on to say, this is the time period, here's the document. Help the board set, it's the course of getting this thing implemented.
Honestly, do you have to do it in person?
Say again?
Does it have to be in person? Better, but does it have to be?
There is, to me personally, there is benefit to face-to-face if it can be arranged. I mean, a lot of people are doing stuff on Zoom now, anyway. So, but
Clarification, are you saying that we would have a 3.5-hour meeting to discuss how we're going to proceed with discussion?
No.
Or is the last 2.5 hours a concrete discussion
of this? But the facilitator,
okay.
the facilitator sets because given the size of the document and the time frame, it's up to the facilitator to say how, you know, and then Jeff works with, maybe Mark, they have a subcommittee or something working with the facilitator to say, we want you to use that time productively. Here's the document. Obviously, we can't do it all in 2 hours, but it's the desire of the board to get this moving from this to a way of framing a discussion.
Could we possibly have a meeting at a restaurant where we could be in person without masks?
Well, that's what I was looking at. There are some places in town, just try to keep it local, that have like a room that we could do that. It's a possibility.
opinion is it's better in person as well. I feel like I've been on a lot of meetings with lots of people. It's really hard to, people talk over each other. I'm kind of tired of that.
Sorry, I didn't hear that last part.
I said I'm kind of tired of the people talking over each other on Zoom.
Oh, yes. Zoom is, I agree, it's very difficult to communicate on Zoom. It's almost as difficult as it is to communicate with masks on. Yeah.
I've gotten used to Zoom at this point, so I'm perfectly fine with teleconferences or video conferences.
I will put in a request, if it's indoors, I'd like it to be as large a room as possible.
This is my biggest one.
Yeah, but if we're talking about restaurants or whatever, like, can you get town hall, a big gym, town hall? District.
Yeah, I mean, there's space available, so.
School, maybe, if they haven't instituted anything.
So do we need to wait to see availability to check, or should we give you a date?
How about this? Would you like me to put out a doodle poll and try to fix a date? Does that seem like a reasonably good thing? I will get that out tomorrow. Put that out, for evenings in August?
August/September, I would suggest.
Okay. And we'll just make a big ugly doodle poll, fill it out, and we'll do our best. Sounds good? And then I will find a space, and I've got a couple irons cooking with facilitators, and I think we can get that arranged pretty quick.
I have one more question.
Yep.
Do we have to have a monthly board meeting? Or could we say in X month, September, we are not having a board meeting, and instead we're going to do a retreat?
So, one could do that. I would recommend, if we were, I would recommend an abbreviated business meeting that literally gavel in, public participation, if any, financial. Do the disbursements, and then that's it. That's really the action that's required monthly, is so that we can pay the bills. If that, can happen, sure.
That's definitely I think that'd be an option we should put on it.
Take the September board meeting and say, we close.
You mean that evening?
Yeah, because you already got the date.
And you already plan on one night a month, so let's give ourselves a break.
And then maybe even continue in October, like, I mean, obviously you don't want to shortchange the business meetings, but it might give us extra time to focus on, whether it's fine policy, then to get things, you know.
So we can, absolutely do that, if that's,
Gavel in, gavel out, that's a public meeting that's, available on the internet or something, and then we gavel out and we have our own.
and in fact, if I can get 4 of you together to be at an earlier time, if that was possible, we could conduct that business at some time and leave the evening for your.
So I'm gonna push that a little further even.
Yeah, like.
Okay. I personally would be comfortable saying, I would leave myself open for that meeting if we were rocking. Okay, I know it's 8:30, but we're making progress. Can we stay till 9:30 or something? I mean, I would be open to maybe not saying to the facilitator, it's 6 to 9, and you can't be here 5 after 9. I would be open to considering that, just based on how our discussions are going. You know, we end the first topic early and we say, let's dive into something else, but I don't know how other people feel, so I'm just throwing that out for consideration, and maybe everybody could let Jeff know.
Yeah, and we could do, you could do the business meeting at 5:30. 5:30 to 6, get 4 of us here, 5:30. 6 to 9.
Everyone anticipates 6 to 9 on. At least,
Right.
Yeah, and if someone can't make it at 5:30, that's fine, as long as we have 4 people. That sound like the way we're going? Sounds good? So the date's already there. do my part of that
Hey,
September.
can I ask you, like, how many have raised the fine policy, can't that be done in a business meeting? Like an open discussion at a business meeting?
Yes.
Yeah, that could,
Well, that's what I'm thinking, but that could maybe be, you know, if we were done at 8:30, but start fine. Because I don't think that's gonna be contentious, well, not that the others are gonna be, but I think the fines is just getting things out on the table, so I don't think that.
I heard everything up to, I think fines, I didn't hear what they were said.
I think that the fine discussion might be something that won't take as long as some of the other meetings. I don't think it's going to be information sharing, getting people's ideas of where they stand. I just don't see it as being as much needed give and take. I don't think we'll be as far apart on some of the other things. We'll see.
Sounds like a good plan, so we've got
Rough outline, sound like a check-in in terms of the board dynamics of law, what's working with you, what's working for us. And then the main thing is asking the facilitator to lead a discussion on this.
Sounds reasonable? Do we agree on that?
Yeah. Food. Food.
And you want food of some sort?
It doesn't have to be a full meal, but
Step outside to eat.
I won't have the sugar level will go at some point, so.
One at a time, people have to sneak into the boardroom to eat. Okay, very good. I'll figure that out. This is, I mean, no joke, all joking aside, the break room accessibility for the staff is a major problem as we put masks back on, because only can have one person in a space at a time. So, all kidding aside, this food issue is my current nightmare. So, seems easy, isn't?
We'll hope for a good nice evening in that, on September 13th, and we'll have.
let's wait till the weather, it's gonna be harder, right?
Yeah. So there's at least a decent chance September's nice. All right, cool. Thank you. That's great, everybody. Appreciate it.
Okay, let's go on to meeting room policy. So this, there's a meeting room policy, it changes in the packet, went through, policy committee, and, just take a look at it. Not a huge change, I don't think, but.
Wait, I'm sorry, what page is this on?
Page 31.
I've seen it, I'm on the committee, my computer died, so. No, I'm pretty, I'm on the committee, so I'm pretty.
This has been through the policy committee. These are the recommended changes. Yes, I would love someone to make a motion.
I make a motion to accept the changes to the policy, I'm sorry, to the meeting room policy, sorry.
Okay, any discussion on the changes?
I just wanted to ask a question on page 32 where it's bold and red.
Yeah.
How often do groups not show up?
Yeah, it happens. I won't make that bold, it'll just be another piece of it, but yes, we track it, we contact the groups. It puts us in this weird position. So if someone doesn't show up, during certain times of the year, people want to use a room, we might have people who want to come and study, which we let people do in the room if there's no meeting room. That's one thing, but then sometimes they're just late. So we say, you know, they've booked it, and we just block that whole time off. So even if someone's booked it, we let them have it for that whole time, and we prevent people from using it, which sometimes gets people grouchy, because they're like, there's nobody in that room, I want to go in there and study. So what we're saying here is if you're not here in the first 30 minutes, that's ample time for you to get here. That's our signal to then allow us to use the room. And then the second half of that is, if you don't show up a couple times and don't call us and tell us you're not coming, you know, these setups are not free, right? They're free of staff time. This is a substantial portion of the time for Kevin and Mike and Mark to set up. And, you know, changing the setup, particularly in this room, can be quite arduous. And then when someone doesn't show up, that's irksome. So I think if they don't show up a couple times, I think it's reasonable for us to say, you know, take a year off. Try again next year. Maybe you'll be able to show up on time. So, we haven't had that in there. It certainly happens. I have been tracking it, and we've been communicating with the groups where this happens, but,
I think this is a reasonable position to take.
Any other questions or comments or concerns on this policy? Okay, all those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Any opposed, abstentions? Okay, motion carries, so the policy is adopted today. Okay, any other new business? We kind of talked about the long-range planning.
it is. I was going to talk about sort of the nature of the report, and that, Paul had asked for feedback back, but it now sounds like we have a plan for feedback back to Paul. I will let Paul know that we have a retreat coming, and we'll have some feedback for him likely after that meeting. Just keep him, he hasn't heard from us in a bit, so I want to make sure, I just try to keep in communication with him, and I'll do that.
And just to, again, to reiterate and clarify, this is the conceptual plan, these are not the planning documents for changes to the library.
Correct. Yep, there's no, and that's where the drawings in there are almost aggressively hand-drawn. Like, they're not CAD drawing, they don't want to look like they are official plans or schematics or any of those things. These are conceptual drawings, and that's why they are literally drawings, to try to bring that point home.
Thank you.
Jeff, was there anything, I'm trying to remember, was there anything that he owed us after those last couple of meetings? He's given us everything?
I think we got all our linear foot issues, which was one of the big questions we had from the staff side about the, I think there's some discussion to be had about how shelving is estimated. I think we take a different philosophy than maybe he does on that, so that would be part of our discussion. And, but I think he's ready to deliver the report. I think, I'll say, hey, give us another month, we're going to have this retreat, I'll have some feedback for you, and then, he's almost billed out completely. We're almost to the end of the contract, so this thing is.
So really what I'm kind of hearing is we should each read this carefully, mark it up for ourselves, so we are ready to, we are familiar with it to discuss the things that are important to each of us.
And I'm hoping from that document, each of you will, in your mind, have an idea of things that resonate or don't resonate as you think about the surveys that we've done with the community, what has been asked of us, how all of these different people, staff, yourselves, our architect has imagined changes to the building, and think about what you think are the most important pieces of those things and where we want to put our effort in addressing those needs. I think that's the decision point we are at now. If we say, okay, tweak the report, get rid of the parts that we don't think belong there, make any necessary corrections, accept that report that comes from him, and then think about what action does that elicit from the board as a whole. I think that's the important discussion. But we're right there. That's the next step that we have to.
Well, I think the idea of resonates is an important one, like what resonates, what's the larger, and how do we move, what's the plan for moving forward?
And I'm not going to give it right now, but if you asked me, you said, Jeff, what's the most important thing in this project to you? I've not made a secret out of it. I could give it to you in 4 sentences. And then, but I think everybody has a very different ideas about, and you're integrating. What do you imagine the tolerance is for the community as far as funding? I don't hear anybody who's standing up here saying, you know what, I think the community wants to spend $50 million on a new library. I haven't heard that once out of anybody, and I don't think we're likely to. So, but I think, absent that sort of extreme example, I think there's a lot of calculations that all of us do, and I think it's time for this body to come together and start to figure that out.
I I did have a question. While I have attended many executive retreats, I've never hired the facilitator, so how much of an expense is that?
I don't know yet.
Can we get it from Upper Hudson? Do they provide any I thought there was facilitation services available.
They do? And that would come at no cost.
Yeah, that'd be no cost. Having been a facilitator, it depends, I mean, I work for organizations, but if I were facilitating, I would charge you $200 to $300 an hour. But that's me, I mean, and that's not a lot, you know, but like if a company cost money, I would charge $200 to $300 an hour. And that would also involve, you know, I wouldn't charge for the planning and all that, but like to have me on site, like if you want to do a 3-hour retreat, I would charge you $900 to $1,000.
Probably.
And that's not outside the going rate, I think. But if we can go, and Lisa, I would trust you to confirm with Jeff and Mark in terms of Upper Hudson and.
All right. Now that plans seem a little bit more concrete, I will contact some of the people that I've been in contact with and try to see if those dates work for them, and then I'll come back with those answers about the funding, and you guys can let me know if those costs seem reasonable.
To me, the biggest skills are going to be experience working with groups, experience facilitating groups, and experience in moving groups along. An experienced facilitator should have those skills. But that, for me, you know, is working with a group, you know, managing a group, but allowing the group to do its business, but also moving a group along.
Okay, any other old business? Okay, on future business,
Can I say one thing on the old business? In the diversity committee, the fine policy came up, and there was some data just available around issues of how it affected folks based on income. And I think I emailed you, Jeff, if that could be cross-referenced based on race.
She's working on that.
Okay.
It's not possible by this meeting, but likely by the time we would have any retreat, if that's the,
Whether it's a retreat or whenever that
Or
comes,
the
I
next
just want
time.
people to let people know that the old business of the fine policy, I asked for that economic data to be cross-referenced by race if possible.
Yeah.
And so whenever that discussion comes up, that could be coming.
Catherine thinks possible, but she'll let you know. Yep.
is that unique to this library or generally?
Here. We have some pretty good data, based on census block tract, median income by census block tract,
Okay.
and medium home values, which track closely together.
Sure. Right.
We've got some pretty good data about fine rates with that. And Catherine would love to present.
Great.
Not necessarily for a retreat, but whenever the fine discussion gets scheduled.
Yeah.
She's queued up, so she's ready to go. It's just, we're waiting for space to have that discussion, because it needs, the data need a little bit of time to absorb and look at. So.
Sure. Okay, I have one item for future business. I watched the meeting from last month, and Carolyn, you talked about how we should be setting up for the next contract, and earlier. Now, it's 2 years, so we have some time, but people can start thinking about that discussion, and maybe at a future meeting, we should talk about kind of how structuring, how the board wants to organize around the next contract. So I just kind of a heads up to people to start thinking about if they want to be involved or how they want to be involved in that discussion as well.
And I think the element of that is involving the union in our discussions as soon as possible.
Yep.
Inviting them perhaps to a first meeting for a presentation or to give us a written kind of presentation of their thoughts.
I think there will be a lot of interest in it.
Or maybe carving out time at maybe like October meeting, and then just like every other month, somehow putting it on the agenda, whether we touch it on or not. Thank you so much for remembering that, because I had forgotten it, but maybe every other month there's some discussion or report out or invitation.
Okay, no, that's great. Okay, any other future business? Comments, concerns, questions? Okay, I'll take a motion for adjournment. Second, all in favor?